friend of mine from Dallas that had come over. We had a day off and went and bought some street heroin and we're doing speedballs. And we were in the car, and the guy put it in me, and I started immediately going to sleep. The last thing I remember is getting out and getting into the seat in the passenger side. And the next thing I did, I woke up and the paramedics were on top of me. Apparently, one of the guys was just going to leave me there. It was the typical what happens with an overdose of an opioid where you quit breathing.
Right.
And my heart was probably still pumping, but I wasn't breathing.
Substance use disorder touches all our lives, and often we feel hopeless or frustrated in our pursuit to understand how and why it happens.
Welcome to APC Recovery Cafe, where we discuss the topics and trends around substance use, provide education and resources, offer recovery support, and also discuss prevention tactics, all through the stories of the people who have been there.
We invite you to grab your favorite coffee or tea and join us for a variety of guests that will bring understanding, information, connection, and hope.
Together, we can break the stigma and pave a brighter future for each other.
Hey folks, welcome back into this edition of APC Recovery Cafe. I'm Art Wimberly. I'm a volunteer at the Addiction Prevention Coalition, a person grateful to be in long-term recovery, and I'm your co-host. And in the studio today, also my wife, Executive Director of APC, Carrie.
Hey, Art.
Hey.
Glad to be here today with you, and glad to have a special guest. So,
why don't you introduce our guest for today?
All right. So today we got Tyler Currier with us, and Tyler also wears a lot of hats, also a friend, but Tyler works in the, I don't even know exactly what you do, so you can tell us later, but works in the trucking industry. He's a person in long-term recovery. He is on the APC Board of Directors, the governing board, which we really appreciate. And he's a really good friend, and we've known him for a very long time. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Looking forward to seeing what this 30 minutes or so brings.
Yeah. So first of all, you have a lovely morning beverage there.
Oh, that is right. From Starbucks.
So what is that?
It is a vanilla latte, one of my favorites. It's so good. I was surprised. Art had asked me earlier what I wanted in my coffee. And when I got a latte, I was even more surprised. Gladly. Love it.
So do you get those a lot? That's a special treat?
You know, it's funny. I travel around a good bit because of my job, and there's always Starbucks close, and usually in the hotel that we stay in. And I'll either get a vanilla latte or a London Fog, but I really like the vanilla latte.
What's a London Fog?
It is a black tea latte that they put a little vanilla flavoring in. So I like that. In fact, that's usually my go-to these days.
I have to try that. I like
London
hot tea.
Fog.
London Fog.
So the travel is related to the job, and it is kind of an unusual job related to trucking, but from a totally different angle than what people think about with trucking. So explain a little bit about what you do.
That's right. I work for a company called Internet Truck Stop was the name of the company, and that's the brand name now, but we go by truckstop.com and actually have rebranded last month to just Truck Stop. And it's a website that helps move freight around the country. So people with loads like brokers and shippers post their freight on our website that says, hey, I've got a load, this full truckload that goes from Atlanta to, say, Omaha. And they post it on there, and people with trucks that are in Atlanta say, hey, I need to, most of them they're indiscriminate about where they want to go. So they say, yeah, I can do that. And they can find out who their partner is. It's all done through the FMCSA, which is the Federal Motor Carrier Association. And they issue motor carrier numbers, so it's all done legally, and so people know exactly who their partners are, so to prevent theft and fraud and those kind of things. So we help in a lot of that. So at times this year we've had as many as 1 million loads a day on our site for trucks.
Wow. So. And you guys also provide logistical data too, don't you?
That's right. Rates on what someone should expect to either pay or receive on a particular load going a particular place. And also safety and insurance documentation, and how to track. It's very comprehensive. The guy that started our company started it in 1995 and was the first internet site at all in the trucking industry. And he started for like $25,000 seed money from his dad. And he sold it a couple years ago for almost $1 billion.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
So coming out of the pandemic with all the supply chain issues, has that affected what you guys
It
do?
has in certain ways, but not what you would think. It hasn't stopped our revenue stream. If anything, people relied on us heavier and posted more loads, like I said, up to 1 million. Our normal day is like 500,000 to 400,000 loads on our site, but the users are around 300,000 a day on our site looking for loads or posting loads or, those kind of things that are research driven. But either way, the pandemic was actually pretty good for us. We did have to work with a lot of our trucking companies and brokerages and reduced pricing for them because they were hurting. So we worked with them, and that's one of the things I like about Truck Stop is that it's a very altruistic type company as well. We're not just after the buck. We want to help and make the trucking industry better, safer, and more transparent.
Fantastic.
So we have a history together, as Kerry said. We all met in recovery at about the same time, about 16 years ago. You were actually introduced to us through the recovery of one of our sons. He met you out in tiny Piedmont, Alabama one night.
That's right.
And he connected us, and then we've been friends ever since. And we've done efforts together in recovery. Specifically for a while for us and still for you, it was within the International Ministry of Celebrate Recovery, Christian 12-step
I left
work.
that out of your introduction. State rep.
Yeah,
for Celebrate
state.
Recovery.
Yeah, Tyler is currently the state team lead for Alabama, which means and this is all volunteer. I know you spend a lot of time doing this in addition to your paid job and the volunteer work. I just want to really thank you for that and honor that, because I know how much time and effort you put into this, and even at your own expense, often traveling around and helping churches either form or start a Celebrate Recovery ministry, or coach them and guide them and train them and encourage them, which you do a lot of, and you appear and you speak and whatever you can do behind the scenes.
Yeah, I guess the main thing for a state rep is to really, like you said, help initiate the start of a new Celebrate Recovery out of church, or actually walk alongside them as they grow, and even later as things change, and we're the liaison between the national movement and the local church.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for doing that, because there's uncountless number of people that have been helped by your behind the scenes work. And as Kerry said early, that's part of what you do now, but there's a story behind how you got here. You didn't start out life thinking, I'm going to be in recovery and help people do recovery. So let's go back and share your story with the folks out there about what that path was that got you here.
Well, what's interesting is that, truly this selfless life that I want to lead started with a selfish way of living. Which became, an addict's viewpoint of life. And when I first really realized I had struggled with substance abuse or substance use, was, I guess, in my 30s. Actually, I turned 30 and missed work the next day, and that's the first time that had happened for me. So it became a struggle, and I actually lost my job and drifted a few years in my late 30s. But finally, around age 38, I found recovery, and I was forced to go into recovery. My son actually found my drugs, which was, pretty embarrassing, but it saved my life, and it changed the course of several things that were to come over the next several decades. And one of them was really discovering that I like helping people succeed and becoming a mentor. My whole family are actually made up of teachers, so I'm sure that's probably part of where I got this, but getting into recovery, it's all based on a mentoring system. And I was mentored and then couldn't continue in the recovery process without being a mentor, right? Mm-hmm. And so with that, it just compounded and has grown and turned into Celebrate Recovery, which is even more of a structured program from Narcotics Anonymous, where I started in AA, to Celebrate Recovery. And the structured process that they have actually even taught me how to be a better mentor and opened up several doors. And that's where we met. And I actually learned from you guys the process of teaching others, because I used to bring my folks from Jacksonville, Alabama over to Birmingham to get trained by you guys because I thought it was so valuable. And what you guys did for me was actually mentor me without even realizing that's what was happening. I learned about giving and teaching and running an organization correctly, which I wasn't before I met you guys. But it was part of the process, and even has led up to what's going on in my life today, which is, working with APC and understanding what prevention means, really, because I don't want others to have to go through what I went through if they don't have to.
Yeah. So when you think back through life, when do you think the improper use of substances really got underway? Was it in your teen years?
Yes, it was. When we moved to Germany, my father was in the service, so we traveled a good bit. We moved to Germany in 1969, and that was really at a different time for the United States and the world in discovering the hippie movement and free love, but really marijuana and drugs were at the forefront of that. And it didn't seem like it was a big deal for addiction and those kind of terms that they use. But it was very intriguing for me, and I really wanted to fit in and be seen differently. And I didn't realize where that actually came from, but that's really when it started. It was probably 1971 was when I first took my first drug, and then it blossomed from there.
So it sounds like, though, if I, just hearing you share your story over the years, there was a fair period of time where you were using, but things were still manageable for you. You were actually kind of going to school and progressing and getting into a career, so there was still some manageability along the way.
Right. It was interesting when we left, right before we left Germany, I had really gotten into, just a group that was mainly using, but I was also an athlete, so which kind of helped, curb that appetite for a while, because I'd have seasons where I'd be playing, but in the off season, I played around. But we moved back to Alabama and didn't know anybody, so it took a while for me to discover that again. And my 11th grade year in high school, I was, I had some struggles with it, and then I became an athlete again. I went back into football and wrestling and basketball as a senior, and so that curbed that. And then I went to college, and things really changed. I didn't have any money, so I didn't do drugs in college. But beer and alcohol was, that was the drug of choice there, and that kind of changed for me once I got out of college and graduated, when I had money. And then when I had money, I was able to afford some different types of experimental drugs for me at the time. But then I moved to Dallas, Texas in '84, and I tell people I had more dollars than cents. And really that's was a fast lane for me, and it took me down pretty quickly within.
I think one phrase you used one time was like, no boundaries and low character, not a good combo.
Yeah, that's true. That's what happened. And, it was such a big playground for me out in Dallas, and it played into all of the things, my hedonism. And I lost my job, lost the money, lost everything that I had, but it also was exactly what God used on me or through me to change things for me, to get me back to where He wanted me. And all of those past experiences were what actually fuels me today, that I can relate to those that are struggling, or can see the pathways and help mentor people past it or through it or even around it.
So you mentioned this shock point about your son finding your paraphernalia and your drugs.
That's right.
And that was kind of what propelled you into recovery.
That's true. It shocked the family. I had to move out of the house and get help before I could move back in.
So you had been able to hide it?
Yes.
Before then?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they knew something was up, but the main thing was that was a demarcation for my life and turning point. So I found in the yellow pages somebody that would take my insurance, and turns out that guy 7 years later helped me start my first Celebrate Recovery. And he was also somebody I'd known before, didn't realize it, but he was an ex-president of the fraternity that I was in, and we had to learn all of their names as pledges, right? So he helped me start Celebrate Recovery and was a therapist as well, and so he had good guidance and mentored me.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've been in recovery for a while, so you've had a lot of time to reflect back, and I know we're involved with lots of families who have, children that struggle, family members that struggle. I mean, looking back, as the use escalated, you had more income and you could use. Do you know the reasons behind the use? I mean, a lot of times we're encouraging the family to, look at their loved one and look for those things that they're self-medicating with. Was it about adventure? Was it about, gave you more energy? Do you know what those driving things were?
First off, people pleasing was something my insecurities that happened probably from moving around a good bit as a kid. I've got that in my testimony when I speak at churches and other places, that we moved around so much, and it was difficult on my sister to fit in, and she became pretty shy and was not an introvert, but I was certainly the opposite of that, extrovert, and I would try to fit in. And so trying to people please. And so that's why I first experimented with drugs, was just really try to fit in. And then, of course, that's also the reason I wanted to be a good athlete. Yep. And that was really more important to me for the longest times. And then when I got to college, the other things took precedent, but it was all about people pleasing and fitting in and not really being sure of who I really was. And like Art said earlier about the character part was not fully developed in me yet. It was in there. I just didn't realize what it was, and it didn't mean as much as trying to make people happy or not wanting people mad at me or, that kind of stuff. Wanted to be liked. So I remember the first time I tried cocaine, I was probably 18, and I didn't have the money. It was a gift from somebody, and I just remember at that moment going, wow, that adrenaline, that was something. I knew that was going to be trouble for me in one day, and I just didn't have the money. So it was several years later before I did it again. But that's also when I had money, and that's really when it started, and it snowballed from there. But also, I enjoyed the job that I had. It was a traveling salesman selling ladies' apparel, and I was traveling all over the Southeast, going to many different cities and different locations. New Orleans, Dallas, Little Rock, Memphis, Jackson, Mississippi were the highlights, but Dallas is where I based out of. So it was like a party everywhere we went. And New Orleans, I remember I would go to New Orleans, and the bartenders on Bourbon Street knew my name.
Oh, wow.
So that was not a good sign. So, hey, Tyler, come on in.
Yeah.
But
in the industry you were in, and as a sales personality, that particular industry, too, pretty much encourages a lifestyle, right?
That's right. In fact, we served drinks to our customers while we were in sessions, selling sessions. So you're right. And that was also what attracted me to the job. Other than that, it was also, the fast pace, and that, it had a kind of a look to it. Like, I thought, well, I'm cool now. I'm in the fashion industry, but it was really just work as a salesman. But that really led me to a quick recovery. Finally, after my son found my drugs, it was pretty much 3 months later that I finally laid it down after some therapy, and I went to an outside meeting, Narcotics Anonymous, and wow, that was the last day, and that was September 2nd of 1995, as best I can remember, when life changed for me, and the 12 steps, and the being able to mentor others as I had been mentored really took precedent.
Yeah.
It really took precedent. I felt like I had something to offer, and that is an impetus today.
Yeah, that phrase in the big book, no matter how far we go down the scale, we've always got something to offer from our own experience. Right. And so beginning to be a sponsor and continue to, if we don't give it away, it won't come back to us.
And they call it experience, strength, and hope.
Yeah.
And that's really what, in a succinct way of telling, addicts that come in, or, people that are, in that lifestyle, whether they're addicted or not, but, it has caused some sort of trauma in their own life. it's an easy and succinct way to tell them, hey, we see what your life is, and eventually that life is going to help somebody else's life. And it's the experience and strength and hope of that will give you credence.
Yeah. So sounds like community, doing this in community was important for you, was helpful?
Well, I enjoyed a group setting, and so I did enjoy that. It was a new group of friends, a new lifestyle away from the push to do drugs, alcohol, that kind of lifestyle where there was shame involved in just about every aspect of it, hiding things, lying, is that whole freedom of just walking into that room and feeling, wow, this is it. The light bulb went off literally that I don't have to live that lifestyle anymore.
And you didn't even have to please them, did you?
That's right. It wasn't about anybody else anymore at that time because I was firmly aware that I had to get help. And it was an I thing that I had to do because of my we thing was my family. And that's what was important. And it was made very evident to me that I was going to lose that if I didn't do so. And it stuck because not everybody actually understands that, or if they do understand it, that they even make a change. So, and I see that quite frequently in the industry that we're in.
So have there been seasons that maintaining your sobriety has been difficult, or once you really gained that sobriety, it really hasn't been that much of a struggle for you?
I used to think about the lifestyle. The first year was a little bit difficult because those I would have using dreams and stress levels. But it wasn't ever that I wanted to use again. There was a couple of times I went through a divorce, but it wasn't about using then or fixing my feelings. I had gained a firm grip on my spirituality by that time. After the first year of working the steps through the Narcotics Anonymous, I found Jesus. It led me to Jesus. It did. And that lifestyle, I was hungry for that. And I saw it was never a thought for me to go back to using heroin or cocaine or drinking anymore. It just wasn't. It wasn't an option. It wasn't anything that was a desire or even it just wasn't there. I just saw it differently, and I didn't want to ruin anything. I mean, that's, I guess, the real impetus of, and a clean time is a big deal when you get as much as I had at the time, even if I had a year. But all of that didn't mean as much to me as, I could deal with, I learned coping skills. That's really what it was about. And so I didn't have to use something to numb my feelings or medicate anymore.
So, Tyler, there's one piece of your story that I want us to kind of visit because it's important to something that's actually going on today, and that is overdoses, the increases in overdose deaths, primarily due to fentanyl. But I know that is a piece of your story. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in 95, right before I got clean, there was an incident that I had gone to Atlanta with some friends, and it was the day off, so we were going to go do some drugs, and we were looking for heroin and cocaine. That's what we were doing as a mixture, a little speedball. And we got it, and we were driving down the road, and somebody was fixing me up while I was driving. And I remember when it hit me that I was going to sleep. I knew. I said, "Oh, I had to pull over." So I pulled over, somehow made it over to the passenger seat and let somebody else drive. And the next thing I do, I woke up, and the paramedics were on top of me, and they had revived me. In fact, I heard one of them go, "He's alive. He's back." Oh. And it turns out they used Narcan on me.
Probably injectable, not the nasal spray in your leg.
That's right. It was an injectable. You're right. I don't know where it was. I just remember they were putting all kinds of tubes in me, and they took me into Grady Hospital over in Atlanta, and but it revived me. And the interesting thing about that is, they told me what it was, and I never heard that word again until like 20-something years later. And I met you guys, and we were setting up Narcan training through Celebrate Recovery gatherings or either other churches or places, any place that we could, to train people how to use this free Narcan that the Jefferson County Health Department was giving away, and it was awesome. And I was talking with some of the trainers about that, and I said, this is what saved my life. And here I am, the irony of it.
Yeah, because you said it's in '95.
Yeah,
that was not typical back then that anybody even knew about it.
Yeah.
Well, you always were an early adapter. So,
well, the thing about it was in Atlanta, and that, and especially from, the way things are in larger cities, they just had it first. I don't know if it was first, or I don't know how long it's even been in effect, but whatever it was, reversed the effect and saved my life.
And saved your life. And Kerry, draw us back in today, because you kind of brought that up as part of his story, but that really brings us to the present and what's going on right now.
And every time we're able to do something like this, have a conversation that people are going to see, this is a topic that we're talking about. And that is the presence of fentanyl today out there. Many of the substances are being laced.
Mm-hmm.
The Adderall, the Oxycontin,
the Xanax,
heroin,
marijuana even, yeah.
And so what we're encouraging everybody to do is Jefferson County Department of Health has made it really easy, and they have an online training. So you just go to the Jefferson County Department of Health site, put it in there, naloxone training, and it's like a 8-minute video, fill out a form, and they will actually mail you your kit.
Yeah.
It's a nasal kit. There's 2 different
it's a
kits.
spray. It's
Yes,
2 shots
nasal
of each
spray.
nostril.
Yeah.
And that's
We all
it.
just got retrained Friday,
Exactly.
right, at an event.
At a conference. So we're and you think, okay, I don't really need that, and that's the education piece, because it's so prevalent. It could be at a family gathering, it could be at a party, it could be at a graduation, it could be at work, it could be
where your loved one is still living with you, which is where most overdoses occur, actually.
Yes, at home.
Yeah.
So we just encourage everybody, take 10 minutes, go and do that training, get the kit. When the kits expire or you use them, you can go back to the health department and they'll give you a replacement kit. So that's one of the biggest things that we can do around prevention, is cleaning out our medicine cabinets, getting all those unused medications out of there so that people don't have access to those, and then getting Narcan trained.
And we cannot overemphasize the fact, folks, the reality right now is just simply this, that if you're experimenting with something, the odds are really very high that you may be taking something that you think is one thing, but that is laced with fentanyl, and it is what is killing people. So we that's just a reality right now. It's not a scare tactic.
Right now.
Yeah, way too many of them.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that you had that experience 27 years ago, and it's what kept you alive for now. But it's got you into what you're doing today that we talked a little bit about. But tell us more about, for those who may not be familiar with the idea of Celebrate Recovery, which is a 12-step process, but it's a little different, it's a little unique, and tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it's a Christ-based 12-step program, which came about in 1991 from a guy named John Baker, who had this experience very similar to mine at home, where it was causing a rift in his marriage, and he had children, and so he went to the AA groups, and he felt like there was more to it, and the Holy Spirit put something in him to create this program that's Christ-based, but using the 12 steps as the background. And he developed a full program of step books with questions, lessons, and using acrostics as his main vehicle of getting people to remember stuff.
Yeah.
I
can still remember the very first acrostic that I encountered. That's almost 20 years
Denial.
ago. Yeah, denial, the D-E-N. I could quote it if nobody wants to hear it, but that's how powerful those types of mnemonics are to help people remember these lessons that affect us as we go forward.
That's right.
I guess the other thing about Celebrate Recovery that we experienced and that you still do with people is the real big factor is it's about community. All recovery is about community. And Celebrate Recovery is very intentional about providing those at all the different levels, right?
Well, I think the word community is so self-explanatory because the root word is unity.
Yeah.
And then commune.
Yeah.
So we're all together doing it as one and growing together and learning together, supporting each other. The interesting thing that I first encountered with those groups is that there was a phone list. You could call anybody that was on that list at any time during the day or night, whatever. And people were actually trying to help. I'm there for you. I've been there. I can help you. Just call me. Whatever. And it was so foreign to me because everything else was so selfish in that world I was
so hidden and
yeah,
secretive.
That's right. Shameful.
Yeah.
But this was open, and it was just like a real breath of fresh air, that it wasn't cloudy. And so this whole new lifestyle really gave me an opportunity to tap into the gifts that God truly had given me, which is community, which is communication. And
encouragement.
Yeah, I'm an encourager big time,
right.
An enthusiast, and I get excited about stuff. And, as a Enneagram 7, that's what you've pointed out to me. And, that's really the root of what happens for me is joy. And
sharing good news. What works.
That's right.
Yeah. So you eventually started a Celebrate Recovery in your church in Jacksonville, Alabama, right?
Right.
And then nurtured that, and then eventually took on a role to help nurture others around the state.
So that's really what the whole program is based on, right? And we've talked about it before, is mentoring. And as a leader for Celebrate Recovery, it taught me a lot about organizational skills, people skills, using the things that God had given me, but it had a structure to it that was able to and manifest itself within this church and then within our community. And then even further, as it expanded, I got to know you, and the role you had at that time was the state rep. And then when you stepped down, it was easy for me to step in because I'd seen what you had done. And again, the structure of it made it easier to follow those steps. And truly what has happened now is that they've expanded it where we have more state reps in the state, and then they've actually put me in charge of, either hiring, firing, looking for new people, mentoring those people. So it's on a different level there as well. So, for me, the next step was, okay, this is an easy, low-hanging fruit for Celebrate Recovery because these are people that actually need help. But then when you guys moved into the Addiction Prevention Coalition, this is about prevention. This is about education, which fits right into something that I'm in tune with and have grown up with around parents and grandparents that were teachers. So the prevention part, I think, is really where it's going to be most effective and important these days instead of after the fact because of the fentanyl.
Yep. And I mean, we every chance we get to talk about prevention, we love to do that because people don't really understand it. The science of prevention is new, and it's still evolving, and I'm sure there's, we're going to continue to learn things, but really figuring out that there are risk factors for people, that eventually may end up in a substance use disorder, and those are genetic and environmental and individual. And for every one of those risk factors, there's protective factors. So, when we're thinking about prevention, we're looking at how do we minimize the risk factors as much as we possibly can, and then how do we increase the protective factors, So, as you've come into APC and watched what we do, I mean, that's a whole lot of our day in and day out work is really in that space around, students and workplaces and community organizations and churches and working and educating people about all those things.
So I think the important part of what you just said is, the education part is huge, but what is the education part? And that is raising the factor that we do have preventative medicine or processes. It minimizes risk, but it also gives you the other side of it. It's not just that we're going to tell you how to do this. These are the warning signs. These are the steps that you take to prevent, this even being a part of your life going forward.
Well, and I mean, even delayed first use, you'll hear that in the prevention space all the time. because the stat is somewhere between 90 to 95% of people that end up with a substance use disorder begin use before the age of 18. So there's a huge connection of early use, when they're teens and even younger, and then, ending up with that disorder. So educating parents about that, of course you don't want your kids to use, but educating them about, okay, what does that mean from even preschool to middle school to high school, having conversations, teaching children about prescription bottles. Okay, this is a prescription. What that means is a doctor has given you a prescription and this is just for you. You're not to share that. I mean, just starting there, teaching them resilience, teaching them when we need help, we ask for help, and modeling that for them. Those are critically important. That's how we learn how we do things. We watch our parents. So all of that stuff, I'll go on and I'll go way, way too far. Mm-hmm. But prevention is critical to where we are.
But I see
today.
that in my own story. What you just described was my story. I saw it early. I was fear-based in a lot of things that I did, shame-based. There was alcoholism in the family from, my grandmother's side, my mother's side, father's side. But truly, by the time I was 12, I was thinking about it and wanted to do it. I was seeking it out. I was too young, didn't have any connections, right? And then moved to Germany, where all of a sudden it became easy because people on the street were, I was in a bigger town, Mainz, Germany, and Wiesbaden, Germany were a hub right on the Rhine River, so there was a lot going on. Right. And if you just go to the train station where people were, offering it right there, because it was not legal, but it certainly wasn't in the shadows. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, man, this has been
and
great.
Thank you for your, first of all, for your passion for recovery and your passion for people in recovery. Mm-hmm. That is a beautiful thing, and it draws people. It draws people in. There's, one of the things I wanted to mention as you were talking about Celebrate Recovery is that what my experience, I was actually able to participate fully in Celebrate Recovery, even though I don't have a substance use disorder. And I think that's something that is different, in the Celebrate Recovery model. But the way that I was loved and supported and sponsored so that I could then deal with the issues that I do have, that were behavioral control and anxiety and perfectionism and all those things that were affecting both me personally and my spouse and my family, and dealing with loved ones who were struggling with substance use disorder and not dealing with that well. Right. But the way that I was, really mentored, changed my life and changed the trajectory of my life.
The beautiful thing about that, and I'll make it short, is that the whole family can go in recovery for different reasons. They walk in, there's a group meeting where everybody gets a lesson or some sort of testimony of success, and then they break off into different groups because it's gender specific, and you don't go to the same groups as your spouse or your children or whatnot. And everybody gets some recovery there, and then when you go home, everybody has met some sort of level of recovery that they can share with each other and talk in recovery speak.
Yep. That's great. It's very important.
The language of recovery is big.
Yeah.
But anyway, going back to you, appreciate you bringing that enthusiasm and that love for recovery and love for people in recovery to our board and helping us to, figure out, okay, what are the things that we really need to be doing and how do we need to be doing those, and bringing a lot of energy to that. And that's really valuable to us.
Thank you very much. I love it. I love it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Folks, thanks for joining us on this episode of APC Recovery Cafe, and we'll come back together soon.
One of the things that APC is known for is being a connector, because we're stronger together.
Not only are we there for those who are suffering through substance use disorder, but we're there for family members, and we really take our job seriously.
We all have personal reason why we're in this field. We're changing people's lives one community at a time.